Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking on a massive and honestly a pretty urgent topic, conservation biology and global change.
It really is. This field sits right at the intersection of ecology, economics, human policy, everything. Our mission here is to distill 5 core concepts for you.
Right. We're going to move from the microscopic, like the genetics of survival, all the way up to global climate policy.
So you can get a clear, quick grasp of how human actions are, well, shaping the future of all life on this planet.
And we have to start with the sheer scale of the crisis. I mean, the numbers are just staggering.
They are. When scientists look at the fossil record, they see a sort of background rate of extinction, the normal pace of things.
And what we're seeing now.
The current rate is estimated to be somewhere between 100 to 1,000 times higher than that background rate.
1,000 times. That just puts so much urgency on everything we're about to discuss.
It absolutely does. And it frames our first big idea. Human activities are the dominant force threatening Earth's biodiversity.
Okay, so let's start with some basic terms, because at risk isn't a single category, right?
Not at all. We make a key distinction. First, you have an endangered species. That means it's in danger of extinction right now across most or all of its range.
And the other.
A threatened species. That's one that's considered likely to become endangered in the near future. It's on the path.
And those categories are getting crowded.
Alarmingly so. Something like 22% of all known mammals and 13% of birds are listed as threatened. To really get a handle on this, though, you have to understand that biodiversity isn't just about counting species. It operates on 3 distinct levels.
Okay, what are those 3 levels?
So first, there's genetic diversity. This is all the variation within a single population.
So not just the number of trees, but all the different traits within that group of trees.
Exactly. And when you lose that genetic diversity, the whole population loses its adaptive potential. It can't really microevolve to handle a new disease or a change in the climate.
So you lose the toolkit for survival. That makes perfect sense.
Then the second level is species diversity. This is the one we usually think of. The number of different species in an ecosystem. We've named about 1.8 million so far.
And losing just one can have a huge domino effect.
A massive one. Look at the Marianas flying fox bat in Samoa. It's endangered, and that's critical because 4/5 of the native tree species there rely on that single bat for pollination and seed dispersal.
Wow. Lose the bat, you lose the forest.
You lose the future of the forest, absolutely. And that brings us to the third level, which is ecosystem diversity. The variety of entire ecosystems, wetlands, forests, riparian communities.
And when you lose one of those, you're not just losing a place. You're losing all the complex interactions that happen there.
Precisely. You drain a wetland, you don't just lose some birds, you lose the water purification, the flood control, all of it.
Of course, we care about this on an emotional level, this idea of biophilia, our connection to nature.
Right.
But there are also some incredibly practical dollars and cents reasons. I mean, just look in medicine.
Oh, the pharmaceutical industry is built on biodiversity. Something like 1/4 of all prescriptions in the U.S. contain substances that were first derived from plants.
Like the rosy periwinkle, right, used for cancer treatments.
Exactly. It's the source of alkaloids that treat Hodgkin's lymphoma and childhood leukemia. We're losing potential cures before we even find them.
And it goes beyond plants. I'm thinking of genetic resources, that Taq polymerase enzyme.
A perfect example. It's absolutely central to modern forensics, to PCR, all of that. And it was discovered in bacteria living in the hot springs of Yellowstone.
Which brings us to what you call ecosystem services.
These are the processes that nature provides for free that sustain all human life. Purifying air and water, detoxifying our waste, pollinating crops.
I remember seeing this wild estimate back in 1997 that valued these services at $33 trillion a year. That number just seems impossible.
It sounds abstract, I know. But you can see it in practice. Take New York City. They had a choice. Spend billions building a new water treatment plant. Or invest about $1.5 billion into restoring the Catskill Mountains watershed, the habitat that naturally filtered their water.
And they went with restoring the habitat.
They did. And they saved hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a perfect case of recognizing the economic value of a functioning ecosystem.
Okay, that's a powerful case for why we should care. Now let's turn to the dark side, the 4 major threats to biodiversity.
The list is unfortunately clear, and it starts with the single biggest threat: habitat loss and fragmentation.
Just the scale of it is hard to comprehend.
It is. I mean, 98% of Central America's dry forests are gone. 70% of coral reefs are damaged. And when you fragment what's left, you create these small, isolated patches that are much more vulnerable to extinction.
Okay, so that's number one. What's the second threat?
Introduced species. These are species humans have moved, accidentally or on purpose, to new places.
The classic example being the brown tree snake on Guam.
Right. It was introduced after World War II, had no natural predators, and it wiped out 12 native bird species.
And it's not just animals. I think of kudzu in the American South.
Or the zebra mussel in the Great Lakes. It clogs intake pipes, changes the whole food web, causes billions in damage every year.
Okay, so number 3 on the list.
Overharvesting. This is when we take organisms faster than their populations can rebound. Think elephants for their ivory, or the great auk, which was hunted to extinction.
We're getting better at tracking this, though, right, with genetics?
We are. Forensic genetics can now analyze DNA from illegal ivory and trace it back to specific elephant populations in Africa. It's helped identify poaching hotspots in places like Zambia.
And it's often driven by, well, the high-end market. The Atlantic bluefin tuna, for example.
Exactly. The demand for sushi is so high that a single fish can be worth a fortune, and that's driven the population into a massive decline.
And the final, fourth threat.
Global change. This is the really big picture stuff. An early example was acid precipitation.
The rain and fog with a pH below 5.2 from burning fossil fuels.
Right. It was devastating for aquatic life. In some Canadian lakes, as soon as the pH dropped below 5.4, the lake trout would just die off. Regulations have helped reduce sulfur emissions, but recovery has been incredibly slow.
That sets the stage well. So let's zoom back in. When a species is already in trouble from these threats, how do conservationists try to save it?
Well, the first thing is to understand the danger of the extinction vortex.
The vortex. That sounds ominous.
It is. It's a downward spiral. A small population leads to inbreeding and genetic drift, which means you lose genetic variation.
Which, as you said before, hurts their ability to adapt.
Exactly. So their fitness drops, reproduction goes down, mortality goes up, and the population gets even smaller, just feeds on itself.
Is there a clear case of a species being pulled out of that vortex?
The greater prairie chicken in Illinois is the textbook example. The population was tiny, fertility was low, eggs weren't hatching.
Yeah.
All signs of low genetic variation.
So what did they do?
They brought in 271 birds from larger, healthier populations elsewhere, a genetic rescue. And almost immediately, fertility rates went up and the population rebounded. They broke the cycle.
So it's about numbers in genetic health. This is where the math comes in, with things like the minimum viable population, or MVP.
Exactly. That's the smallest size a population needs to be to have a chance of surviving long term. But even more important is the effective population size, or NE.
Because that's not just the total count of animals.
Right. It only includes the individuals that are actually breeding successfully, the ones passing on their genes. You could have 1,000 animals, but if only 10 are reproducing, your NE is tiny.
The grizzly bear case in Yellowstone is a great example of this. The total population is about 700 bears.
But the effective population size, the NE, is only about 175, just a quarter of the total.
And why is it so much lower?
It's because not all bears breed. You have young ones, and some males might dominate breeding. Plus, grizzlies need huge territory, so if they're isolated, they can't contribute to the gene pool.
So what's the solution?
The modeling showed that just introducing 2 new unrelated bears every decade could drastically cut the loss of genetic diversity.
That's a surprisingly targeted intervention.
Yeah.
But even if you have the numbers right, you also need the place to be right, the critical habitat.
Absolutely. The red cockaded woodpecker illustrates this perfectly. It doesn't just need pine forests. It needs mature longleaf pine forests with very low undergrowth.
Why the low undergrowth?
So it has a clear flight path to its nesting cavities high up in the trees. Historically, frequent low-intensity fires would clear out that undergrowth.
So conservationists had to become fire managers.
Precisely. They started using controlled burns and even manually excavating nesting cavities to mimic those natural conditions. It was very hands-on, and it worked. It just shows conservation is always this trade-off, trying to find a win-win between a species' needs and human demands.
Okay, so we've looked at saving one population. Let's zoom out again to the landscape level. How does the whole region's structure play a role?
Now we're talking about landscape and regional conservation. And a key concept here is edges, the boundaries between ecosystems.
And human activity creates a lot of very sharp artificial edges.
It does, and that tends to reduce biodiversity. It favors what we call edge-adapted species.
Like white-tailed deer.
Exactly, or the brown-headed cowbird. It's a nest parasite. It loves the edge because it can feed in the open fields but then sneak into the forest to lay its eggs in the nests of other smaller birds. More edges can mean more parasitism.
So to fight that fragmentation, the idea is to create movement corridors.
Yes, these are strips of habitat that connect the isolated patches. Think of a protected area along a river or even those wildlife overpasses you see on highways in Europe.
And they help reduce inbreeding and let animals move around.
They do, but there's a downside.
Mm-hmm.
A study in Spain found that these corridors can also help diseases spread much faster between populations that were previously separate.
It's always a trade-off. Okay, another key strategy is to focus on biodiversity hotspots.
Right. These are relatively small areas that have a huge number of endemic species found nowhere else, and many threatened ones.
It's a way to get the most bang for your conservation buck.
It is. I mean, less than 1.5% of Earth's land surface qualifies as a hotspot, but those areas contain over a third of all species. The problem is, climate change might shift where those favorable conditions are, so we're in a race against time.
Which makes the zoned reserve model seem really smart because it tries to integrate human activity.
It's a great approach. You have a legally protected core area, but it's surrounded by buffer zones where people can live and work, but in a regulated, sustainable way. Costa Rica has been a world leader in this.
And it seems to work in the water, too.
For sure. Marine reserves, like the one in the Florida Keys, show that protecting a core area boosts fish populations so much that it actually improves the catch for fishers in the surrounding waters.
And since over half the world now lives in cities, we can't forget urban ecology.
We can't. We have to start seeing cities as habitats that can be restored. There was a project in Vancouver, for instance, to stabilize the banks of a creek and plant native species.
And what happened?
They brought back the cutthroat trout, a thriving population right in the middle of the city.
Incredible. Okay, that leads us to our fourth big concept. The rapid changes happening to Earth's systems, starting with chemistry, like nutrient enrichment.
This is a huge one. We plow fields, which depletes nutrients, so we add fertilizer, but we often add way more than the critical load that plants can actually absorb.
And the rest just runs off into the water.
Exactly. And the most dramatic example of that is the nitrogen runoff from the Mississippi River Basin, creating that massive, low-oxygen dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico every single summer. It devastates fisheries.
Next on the list of chemical threats is biological magnification.
This is a terrifying process. It's how toxins become more and more concentrated as you go up the food chain.
Because predators have to eat so much from the level below them.
Right. A study in the Great Lakes found that PCBs, a type of industrial chemical, were magnified almost 5,000 times from the phytoplankton at the bottom to the herring gull eggs at the top.
5,000 times. That's just a staggering number.
And that's exactly why DDT was so devastating. It accumulated in birds like pelicans and eagles and caused their eggshells to become fatally thin. It was Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, that really blew the whistle on that and led to the DDT ban in the U.S. in '71.
But the problem of contaminants hasn't gone away. Now we have things like pharmaceuticals showing up.
Yes. Hormones from things like birth control pills aren't fully removed by wastewater treatment, and even in tiny amounts they can feminize male fish, causing entire populations, like the fathead minnow in one Canadian study, to collapse from reproductive failure.
And then there's the problem that is just everywhere. Plastic waste.
It's truly pervasive. Millions of metric tons enter the ocean every year, and the sun and waves break it down into these tiny microplastics.
Which animals then eat.
Right. But it's worse than that. A study of corals found that those living near plastic waste had a 20-fold increase in disease rates. The plastic might be carrying pathogens or just physically damaging them.
Which brings us to the ultimate global change. Climate change. The directional change that lasts for decades.
And we know the driver. Atmospheric text CO2 has gone from about 274 parts per million before 1850 to, well, over 410 today.
And that amplifies the natural greenhouse effect.
Right. That effect is what keeps our planet from being a frozen ball at negative 18 degrees Celsius. But by adding more text CO2, we're trapping more heat. That's why we've seen about a 0.9 degrees Celsius rise in global temperature since 1900.
And the biological impacts are everywhere now. Species are shifting their ranges, the timing of natural events, the phenology is changing.
Yes, like plants sprouting earlier. This is a huge problem for caribou, whose migrations are timed to a specific schedule. Now they arrive too late for the peak nutrition, and their calves suffer.
The heat and drought also weaken organisms' defenses.
Exactly. It stresses pine trees, making them much more vulnerable to mountain pine beetle outbreaks. And the models are clear. Only when you combine natural factors like solar cycles with human factors like fossil fuels can you reproduce the warming we've actually observed.
And last on this list of global threats, ozone depletion.
This was the crisis of the 80s. With tech CFCs destroying the protective ozone layer in the stratosphere, that layer blocks harmful UV radiation.
The good news here, though, is that the world actually acted.
It did. The Montreal Protocol in 1987 was a huge success. It regulated tech CFCs, chlorine levels in the atmosphere have stabilized, and the ozone layer is slowly healing. It's a great lesson in what's possible with international cooperation.
And that success story is a perfect bridge to our final concept, sustainable development.
The definition is so important. It's economic development that meets our needs today without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs.
It sounds great in theory, but does it really work?
Costa Rica is the proof. As they invested in conservation and zoned reserves, their human welfare stats skyrocketed. Between 1930 and 2010, infant mortality dropped from 170 to just 9 per thousand births.
Wow. And life expectancy.
Soared from 43 to 79 years. Their choice to value their natural resources directly improved the lives of their people.
So it's not an either. It's not the environment or development.
They are two sides of the same coin, and what really drives that at the core is biophilia, that inherent emotional connection we all have to life. It's the engine for all of this.
Okay, that was a lot. Let's do a quick recap. We started with the 3 levels of biodiversity, genetic, species, and ecosystem, and the 4 major threats driving them down.
Right. Habitat loss, introduced species, overharvesting, and global change. Then we saw how conservation can work, from calculating an effective population size for a single species.
All the way up to designing zoned reserves for an entire region, balancing human needs and nature.
And finally, we looked at those huge global challenges, from nutrient pollution and toxins to climate change, and the qualified success story of the ozone layer.
And that success, as you mentioned, brings up a really crucial final question for you, the listener, to think about.
It does. Even though the Montreal Protocol was a success, researchers recently found an unexpected rise in CFC levels in the atmosphere. It suggests someone, somewhere, is producing them again against the treaty. So the question for you is this. If we can figure out the solutions, how do we as a global community ensure that monitoring and enforcement actually stick for good, even for problems we thought we solved decades ago? It requires a kind of perpetual global vigilance.